morning, everybody. My name is Trace Nelson, and we are back at it, week 6, for these conversations around the politics of food. I am so excited. I want to add her in right away. I guess this week is going to blow y'all's collective minds. Let's see. Oh, yes,
Yes,
Professor Zella Palmer. Yes, okay. See, I'm so accustomed to seeing you with, praise or rap, and I feel you just
listen,
okay.
it's the quarantine, and I'm just in house. Just I live in New Orleans, so you got to do what you got to do.
That's right, gorgeous. So we posted it a little. Afropunk posted a little while ago, and I know I've been talking to folks, and especially the Black food folks community, about the profound nature of this conversation. For those of you unfamiliar, I hope that you all deep dive into Professor Zella Palmer. But Zella Palmer is the chair, director of the Dillard University's Ray Charles program in material culture, which she will talk about because it is a profoundly beautiful program. But Zella is a fine artist, a former dancer. She is a beautiful writer and author of a cookbook that just came out about the 150-year history of Dillard University through the figures that have come through and supported that university. She is so profoundly committed to Black people and Black culture, and the work she's doing at Dillard and really just in her own work is extraordinary. Some of her work includes preserving the legacy of Creole legend Chef Leah Chase. She's written about and produced documentaries around her. Her work as a historian is groundbreaking and so profoundly beautiful. So I'm so honored and excited to talk to someone I consider a friend.
Oh, I'm honored. Therese, you are, you are the mother hen of all of us, and the work that you are doing is incredible. And thank you, Black food folks. Thank you, Afropunk, for having me today.
So, it's so many, I feel like we talk all the time, and there are so many places to begin, but I feel like beginning at the beginning is really critical for you because so much of Black history, in my opinion, is like seeking out evidence, right? Like this sort of detective work we all sort of have to do to sort of discover our roots. And for you, I feel like from your parents especially, but your familial legacy is so wound up and weaved through the fabric of all of our collective Black imagination. So I don't know, I feel like starting at the beginning for you is so critical in that way. So can you just, give us a little taste? Because I feel like you're around the country and around the world, your story has such a broad spectrum.
Well, I'm the third generation to work at an HBCU. My great-grandfather, he was the first, Dr. Joseph Ward. He was at Tuskegee University. He ran the first Black Veterans Hospital and after World War I. He was a soldier. He was the decorated soldier, and he was there under Robert Russell Moton. And he was also the personal physician to Madam C.J. Walker. So I write in length about that. Alelia Bundles also has a book about and mentions him. And if you all saw the documentary, the scene where the doctor came to her bedside, that was my great-grandfather. Then my grandfather, he worked at Howard, Lincoln. He was a professor, graduated from MIT in the 30s in engineering, in mechanical engineering. So I have a long legacy of, being in the HBCU space. And then my mother, she was a professor and dean of English at Northwestern University in Chicago, and she ran the Black House, which was a space for African-American students. And my dad, he is, just a wealth of knowledge, and he always says he collected people. So he worked closely with the United Nations and with Kofi Annan for quite some time, and Undersecretary Sashi Thoreau, who is now in the cabinet in India. And, you know, my house growing up on the south side of Chicago, it was the place for activism. You know, Mayor Harold Washington had his first campaign in our living room. You know, my godfather, Uncle Jan Carew, he was the poet laureate of Guyana. And, you know, he just a revered, if you all ever read Rape in Paradise, that was the book that he wrote. And I grew up around all of these incredible legends. So, you know, I am just honored and humbled to be from that legacy.
Mm. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering about the posture that you then have when you go out into the world, because we know for sure that insulation of that kind of legacy and that sort of history wraps you up in a way that prepares you uniquely to interrogate the world, but we also are in the world, and a lot of times I think the challenges are still real. And so I'm thinking about navigating, you know, being a teenager, thinking about art in a really expansive way, thinking about where you, like what you wanted to study. And I mean, I feel like that's a lot of legacy to sort of, you know, sort of be confronted with that young, and like so how you decide what to do next. Because I mean, your educational background and your life in arts was something that I was always so fascinated by.
You know, it's funny, you know, when you're a teenager, you just look at your parents, you know, kind of like, you know, like, and my dad would always say, and you don't realize until you get older sometimes. And he said, you know, if you don't do politics, politics will be done unto you. And that stuck with me, you know, and but as a teenager, you know, I went to Lincoln Park High School in Chicago when they had a dance program. So I was a dance major under Miss Mack. She was legendary. I ended up studying in Alvin Ailey when I was 15 years old, you know, so my parents really, you know, nurtured my creative side, you know, for a long time. And then eventually, you know, I would go on to study at University of Toronto in museum studies, you know, and I wanted to be in the museum space and be able to control narratives because I was really passionate about history, you know, and I ended up working at DuSable, and now here at DuSable in Chicago, DuSable Museum in Chicago, and here I am now.
Yeah. Okay, because that brings us, I mean, it brings us really particularly to your life in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering about, because I'm sure that you have familiar connection to New Orleans.
Yes.
But it feels like your life in New Orleans has been this almost translation of New Orleans for folks outside of it. The work you're doing at Dillard in a lot of ways, in my opinion. Because we got to talk about Dillard, because the charge on your work is really about framing the sort of cultural, like the material culture of a city that is so, I don't know, we put our collective imagination on New Orleans from outside. And I feel like that is a tricky and a sometimes problematic frame or lens, because we don't really understand the mechanism and sort of the social contract that exists there. So I'm wondering about, if you talk about Dillard University, not just HBCU, but a New Orleans specific one, and kind of what called you to Dillard.
Well, you know, Dillard, we just celebrated our 150th anniversary last year. And when you think about Dillard University and just the legacy that it holds, you know, it's part of that Black Ivy League, you know, and just the fact that, you know, formerly enslaved people helped to build this university, you know, and it merged between Straight University and New Orleans University. And, you know, just the people who went to that school, you know, and I felt that it was important in the cookbook to tell these stories. And although, you know, many of my colleagues tell these stories, Malik Bartholomew, you know, many professors, you know, incredible professors, and we tell the story every day at Dillard, you know, and the city knows Dillard's story, you know, and it you know, with the Ray Charles program, when Ray Charles came up with this vision that he wanted to preserve Black culture, you know, back in 2003, when Dr. Lomax was the president at the time, you know, we put our heads together and built this program together, you know, And it's all about preserving Black culture, and you know, a large component of that is food.
Right. I mean, so because a lot of times I feel like, not that you don't take up that mantle, but like you sort of reconcile how you kind of come into food, like not by like by proximity, right? Like so
Yeah.
you see the power in talking about these narratives. I mean, first time I met you was this lecture series that you were producing. That was kind of like the, I don't know, it felt like the coming out party for what the potential
Right.
for using the framework of material culture to expand everybody's sort of thought process around how we think of food.
Right.
Something about being charged with culture, but then also recognizing the power of food in that. It's something I think a lot of cultural spaces are sort of catching up to. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
about like Brian at Museum of African Diaspora. Like there are spaces now that are really sort of thinking about the power of food culture, and I'm wondering if from like the your museum background and sort of understand the reach and sort of breadth of cultural institutions, if you see that as like a, if you, because I think idealistically I see it, but is that really where we're headed? Like I feel like it kind of is, but I just wonder from a professional point of reference.
Well, you know, it's always been a struggle to tell our stories, you know, in both spaces, you know, and just to give it validity, you know. And I think when we look at, you know, our current situation, there is a huge need to reclaim our history and, you know, to bring out those who have been, you know, telling the stories. And I think about New Orleans and specifically Black New Orleans scholars, you know, and a lot of times, you know, the research stays local. They can't get a publisher, you know, all
Mm,
kinds of challenges. And then somebody comes along and reads their research and then gets a publishing deal, you know, and that is painful, you know, and there's so many, you know, people in the city that have done the work, you know, and you know, and it's fascinating to see where New Orleans is headed as telling these stories, whether it's through, let me say, the Free People of Color that has been telling that story.
mm-hmm.
You know, New Orleans African American Museum that is now, you know, reopened.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, the Whitney Plantation, the Amistad Research Center. And, you know, we just want to make sure that we have the academic, you know, backing behind that and the scholarly work, and to, you know, raise the next generation to, you know, we just launched a food studies minor last semester, and we're the
Mm-hmm.
only second HBCU to do that. And when you think about what's happening with COVID, my students, you know, after taking introduction to food studies last semester, they see the food security up close and personal now. You know what I mean? Just in what we're even dealing with this pandemic. I mean, they saw it before and they dealt with it in their own families and communities, but now, you know, just seeing what's happening, it's real, you know?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know how much you want to talk about, but I really am interested in how y'all are doing. How are you doing? Like, you know, just how are you coping?
Yeah.
What is just, I mean, what is, just start there because I know you know, your family has definitely been touched by COVID and,
Yeah.
like from a health perspective, but also just the sort of psychological shifts that you, and the sort of the ballet that you having to do as an educator, like rethinking what, you know, getting these kids through last semester was going to be like.
Yeah.
And so how are you doing? And
I'm okay. You know, I put in my, you know, I just think of the women before me, you know,
mm,
my great, who I'm named after. It's, you know,
mm,
the irony, I'm named after my great grandmother, Zella Locklear, you know, and she is a descendant of Lumbee Native Americans, the tribe in North Carolina. And
mm,
she had to deal with the Spanish influenza, you know, and I remember those stories when my grandmother told me that, you know, she lost her brother and she never got over that pain. You know, she was only 9 years old when she lost her brother, and all three of them were sick in the bed while, you know, her husband was off to war trying to prove that he too is a man. He
mm,
too is, you know, he's a black man, but he's a man, you know? And
mm,
so I think about those things and just what she had to deal with. So that gives me strength, because I prayed to, talk to her and just, ask for strength, because, it's challenging. My daughter got sick. I have students, who are in their senior year who are having mental health breakdowns,
Right.
who, are dealing with their grandparents who raised them, getting sick, or, some, one of them, just dealing with suicide from somebody else. So it's a lot of mental health issues out there. And I'm just trying to show up and be there for my students, for hospitality workers, because also our restaurant industry, we have a large restaurant industry. There's a lot of Black owned restaurants in New Orleans, and they need support when this comes back, and I'm hoping that people will really do their part to support Black restaurants in New Orleans and across the country.
1,000,000%, because that's kind of where I was wanting to head, because it feels sometimes, like, again, the point I was making earlier about our collective imaginations, I feel about New Orleans like I do about the Caribbean, or I do about cities like Charleston or Savannah, where so much of, I'm in New York, but and so there's a degree of tourism that is required to keep the mechanism of our city alive, but there are factors outside of that. I feel like cities like Charleston specifically, but definitely New Orleans and all throughout the Caribbean, there's this really, fragile social contract that happens between the city, the residents, and the folks who come to consume that culture. And I've always been fascinated, just all the trips coming. I feel like every time I've come to New Orleans, it's been for you and Dillard, but the frame of that, like that interaction with New Orleans is very different than coming for the, the turn up of it all, the celebration of it all. And that, I feel like the priorities now have shifted so specifically. I'm wondering about the sense in the city from a resident's point of view, from a hospitality point of view, how people are feeling about this double-edged sword, right? Like your city is clean probably for the first time. Your city is quiet, and some of the images of Casino Harris, the quiet streets, and his bar series is so weirdly timely this moment. So I'm wondering about your thoughts on the sort of social contract. It's a tricky balance to strike.
I mean, New Orleans has dealt with so much historically, even in recent times, and we pull on each other as a community to support each other. When I think about Miss Linda Green, the Yakameen lady, and I think about a lot of, caterers, people who, at the Jazz Fest. I mean, this is, we depend on the economy, the tourism economy, and when we don't have tourists, we're hit hard, and if the Jazz Festival isn't there, all of these, that they're banking on that money, this is the money that carries them, musicians as well. This is what carries them for the entire year, So, I want to actively work with, other organizations to make sure that our creatives who, there's Out of Joy Theater right now on Canal Street. They posted, the reason why you love New Orleans is because of Black people, basically, you love everything you love about New Orleans is because of Black culture,
That's right.
Let's put the money where it belongs, because, they have been feeding, essential workers, the Munch Factory, Heard That Kitchen, Dookie Chase, the list goes on and on and on. There's so many restaurants, Moro's, we need to make sure that we keep those businesses open, because they're our neighbors, they're our community. They went to high school, we got to take care of our community,
Yeah. I'm thinking about, I guess what I'm thinking also is, I'm thinking about people like Miss Linda, thinking about people who, there's Linda Green, if you all are unfamiliar, is, I don't know, she's this just firecracker of a light of a human being. She is just crazy talented. She is the ambassador for Yakameen and the heritage and the sort of history of that dish, but it is a staple that people look for every time they are at some sort of public event. She caters, but she's, to my mind, there's a woman named Cleo Johns who was a caterer here in like the 40s, 50s, 60s. And you can't find evidence of her. And I feel like, I mean, when the first time I met Miss Linda, I thought of her. Because it's this feeling of her representing so clearly what the unseen sort of spirit part of New Orleans is. And I'm interested in, I don't know, something about, this is, I'm telling you, Zella, the first time I ever came down there was this imagery of the streetcar, because it's, again, like our collective imagination on New Orleans.
Right.
And it's this area where like one of the classic streetcars was juxtaposed to a sort of more modern bus. And then on the outside of the streets, like the main thoroughfares, was all of the wrestlers. And in the center, waiting for buses, were all these Black and brown people. And it just was, it still sits with me, the juxtaposition of the working folks in the middle of that large expanse, waiting to go home, and all these revelers into the night. And I'm wondering about, you talked about, I'm going to make sure I follow up and get a list of resources, but like, to your point about, you know, coming down to New Orleans and celebrating, what should the support look like from people outside whose imaginations are still on New Orleans, still, you know, people, while they're not thinking about people like Miss Linda who don't have contracts, I know, who don't have, you know, y'all are worried about the Essence Fest not happening. Y'all are worried, you know what I mean, like that kind of thing. What could support look like if our imaginations were expanded and we could do something tangible?
Well, you know, downstairs a Facebook group called Where Black New Orleans Eats. I think that's a good place to, and just, you know, when you're ready to come, you know, check it out. Ask the local, where do I go eat? Over tip, you know, just if you can come and just be like, you know, if if you have the resources and you can, you know, just, you know, send a check in the mail to your favorite Black restaurant in New Orleans. You know, they need it. You know, they're dealing with so much. And if we lose this, and not even just that, Miss Linda, you know, she got a Cash App. You just DM her, you know, you find her and just send. And not just that, but I hope that, you know, we also get some solid business plans. We launched a restaurant and catering management course at Dillard University about a year ago. So we need to bring that back. You know, Dana Hahn at Carmel Cafe, who has really done a lot of work on local sustainability and, you know, was the instructor for the course, helped at least 20, you know, restaurateurs and, you know, from all walks of life and caterers. So, you know, we can do something more tangible where we don't necessarily have to just go directly to that person and that business. Put it in their hands. They will do right with it. You know, put it in and servers and hospitality workers, you know, they're, I mean, just think about how many, you know, hotel workers and, you know, those who are just at home and not sure what's going to happen after this, you know? So, and affordable housing, you know, they'll need affordable housing because, I mean, you know, the electricity bill's still coming, the water bill's still coming, and then we're now in hurricane season, you know?
Right.
So we don't know what's going to happen, but we're positive as always, you know, and we just keep our head up and we work together as a community. And I'm so grateful to just seeing everybody in New Orleans, you know, grow food, put food out. And if you have extra food, put food out in their front door. You know, there's Ron Brody, who's been doing that in the 7th Ward, just putting out, you know, food for people and, you know, plants, whatever you need, you know, just putting it out there. So,
So it's like, again, I always have so many questions for you. So we could talk about the cookbook, but I feel like there's also this really right conversation that we've had before that I really would like be so interested to unpack a little bit further about this connection back to the continent. You spent so much time in different countries. You have, like, you know, very strong ties and friendships and collaboration with folks who are embedded. And I just, something about your friend Comfort, who's I feel like she's in Canada, but like whenever I see her out in the world and like through her social media, I'm always so inspired. But to hear you talk about her is so powerful. But there's this really particular, because again, this romanticizing of places and spaces is something I really am conscious of a lot recently. And we romanticize the continent, right? The year of return, that kind of feeling of trying to find connectivity back to the continent. And you talk a lot about, you are thinking about really strategically about what return really looks like, what legitimate continental connectivity in terms of like business collaboration, in terms of like, you know, thinking about the brands and businesses you want to open, but thinking about them outside the context of America is something you think about critically a ton. So I wonder if you could talk some about that.
Well, you know, because I grew up in such a bicultural family that was steeped in the diaspora and the continent, you know, like I said, you know, some of the foremost leaders of Africa and in the Caribbean were in my parents' house and on their phone, you know? And so, you know, and then also my cousins you know, their father is Nigerian. So I grew up, you know, going to their house and just, you know, my aunties that have geles and, you know, eating pounded yam and egusi and, you know, all of those dishes that are near and dear to me, you know, because, and then later in life, you know, when I met Comfort, you know, sometimes you have a best friend that's your soulmate, you know, and we met in University of Toronto. And, you know, she is an incredible, brilliant leader. And I'm just admire her so much. And, you know, she started, she's done so much, you know, and she's just, if you look her up, you know, you all can, you know, get an idea of Comfort Sakoma. But in Nigeria, they know her very well. She's one of, and Africa, she's done, you know, she's been featured in Forbes magazine as one of the top leaders, you know, and she's still young, you know, and she started her own consulting company. You know, she worked with 20,000, you know, women across the continent. She's traveled all through the continent. So a lot of the inspiration that I get about the continent is from her. And, you know, my cousin Obi, shout out to him. He lives in Lagos. You know, that's my first cousin. And, you know, Kathy that works at HBO in LA. So I love my Nigerian peeps, my family. But, you know, I do think that there needs to be a shift, you know, and a perception. It started happening in social media where you start seeing, you know, just, you know, images of Nigerian weddings, you know, or images, you know, and Cardi B putting out on our social media what it really looks like, you know, and Nigerians and not, you know, Africans, West Africans, all throughout the continent have been saying that the image that is being portrayed to us as African Americans is not nuanced, you know. And the image that they're seeing of us is not nuanced. And we need to have these conversations. And I look at, you know, how like Wizkid, Davido, I mean, all, you know, the Nigerian celebrities, and Comfort made that good point, you know, for the first time, they're posting things about African Americans and about social justice. And we sometimes miss the moments and the connections to make this on a bigger platform, right? And we sometimes get focused on, oh, you know, this or that, and, you know, you do this or you do that. We don't have time for that anymore, you know? And I think the year of the return is definitely a positive, you know, but I encourage people to go beyond that, you know. Now that you went, Ghana is the port, you know, the beginning, the door is open, but there's so many incredible things happening in Lagos, you know, and just seeing, and even in the food scene, like, you know, and I love to see so many West African chefs that are doing it, you know, and they're bringing the cuisine here. And, you know, FYI, like Lagos has a booming, you know, food scene, and they are, you know, culinary schools, and you would be blown away by it, you know. And it's positive to see. It's positive to see.
100%. So we're doing good on time.
Yeah.
I feel like I want to circle back to the cookbook, because I feel like right now everybody has all these listicles and these books about, these lists about the cookbooks and books you should be thinking about and reading. And I really, I feel like the Dillard University book is such a, like, it's this beautiful, almost time capsule, right? Like, I think it not just sort of chronicles Dillard's history, but in so many ways, it's Black history, right? It's just this really interesting, really, I mean, the curation of that project had to be affirming, but also I'm sure challenging in lots of ways. And I'm wondering if you could talk about like how it came together and some of the stories that you were surprised at or excited about. Because people should just, wherever your books are sold right now, Amazon, whatever, copy, because it's such a beautifully done, like just gem of a book, and it's just Black history in your hands. So it's available right now. Please just buy your copy. It is something you're gonna thank Zella for putting her soul into, you know. But just talk about that because I feel like there's a history, a heritage of sort of university books or sort of these collective sort of cultural snapshots, and you sort of picked up that sort of signal about the power of a book that frames time in that way.
Yeah.
So talk a little bit about the books that you were inspired by, but certainly the process of putting together this particular book.
Well, I was really inspired. It's on the tip of my tongue, but she wrote, I think back in the 90s, she wrote 3 cookbooks about Tuskegee, Hampton, and Howard. And so I was inspired by that motto. And I said, you know, how is it that we, you know, New Orleans is just, you know, is legendary for its cuisine, you know. And I wanted to do something I wanted to write a cookbook about Dillard University. And here, you know, Malik Bartholomew and John Kennedy, who are in the library at Dillard University and our librarians and archivists, you know, said, Zella, you need to come in here, you know. And I saw a cookbook that was from the 1950s under President Dent, who is, you know, one of the, before Norman Francis at Xavier, there was President Dent. I mean, he was the man, you know, in New Orleans at the time. And him and his wife, Jessie Covington Dent, they brought the world to Dillard. You know, they brought so many, Eleanor Roosevelt, Marian Anderson. I mean, all of these people, you know, Haile Selassie, Emperor Haile Selassie was at Dillard University and gave a talk to 3,000 people on our campus, you know. I think that is one of the most incredible stories ever. And they had to remove all the signs, you know, all the Jim Crow signs, they had to remove them. And they had to have an integrated reception because he was royalty, you know. So just to see, for Black folks to see that, you know, but then in the forward, there's an interesting, you know, I was able to interview Miss Leah Chase before she died. And she talked about that and how she felt. She actually saw Haile Selassie come down Canal Street, but she was pained because nobody knew who he was. And she said at that moment, that's when she decided to send her children to an HBCU because she wanted to make sure they knew their history, you know. And every year, you know, we don't do our part sometimes in donating to HBCUs. And we need you. And I look at, you know, what's happening on the ground with a lot of things that, you know, the activism and, you know, healthcare. Those are HBCU grads who are doing it. You know what I mean?
That's right.
If you don't fund them, then we won't have the support for our community, right? So, you know, this cookbook was a cookbook that raised money for students, you know. And in it, Mrs. Dent, she basically collected all of these famous people. So she collected recipes from Lena Horne, from Eleanor Roosevelt, the first lady of the time, you know, Marian Anderson, Mary McLeod Bethune, Ralph Bunche. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. And then there's a second cookbook that we had that was when we had an international food festival, you know, because a lot of times those who don't know about HBCUs or have never been to an HBCU, it gets judged sometimes, right, in the media or their perception of it. But it's actually a really diverse place, you know. So we have all of these international professors. We have the you know, the Israeli embassy gave a recipe. You know what I mean? So all of these people collectively support this because they actually do want to, they do know that to invest into HBCUs will produce solid individuals that, you know, are going to be respected members of their community and will give back. So, and then in Dr. Kimbrough, our current president, our hip hop president, who is incredible. We, you know, collected recipes. I mean, there's recipes from his wife, who runs the first pre-law, you know, center at Dillard University, and is creating the next Black lawyers. You know, you can't beat that. So we collected all of these recipes and we put it out there. And I think, you know, and all the proceeds will go back to Dillard University. So
awesome. Yeah, it's, I mean, it's one of those things where I feel like the tangible. I'm interested. So I get concerned sometimes because I think people, people's imaginations around the power of food as a particular lens on culture is limited. I think that there's some folks who think we shouldn't really use food as that sort of lens. And even the way we frame these talks, I mean, the politics of foods are very particular. It's going to mean something different for everybody, right? What's your perception of the political nature of food, whether it be from sort of food justice space of thinking about food security or farming. A lot of our conversations have been with farmers or people who are in the sort of food activist, food justice space. But I also think that we discount the power of the scope of the lens when we don't talk to chefs. We don't sort of think about you know, sort of the producer as an expert, or sort of as a real sort of boots on the ground activist in that way. Because we think about, I think when you think about New Orleans specifically, but again, like places that and it feels like the whole country at this point, but cities that are so myopic about the disparities that exist in our industry and exist in hospitality overall. Hearing from folks who are doing this work every day, who give their lives over to this industry and to this sort of service, that is inherently political, right? I feel like that's sort of where you get the most visceral stories. It's one thing to march and protest. It's another thing to be Miss Linda in a city that constantly is challenging, you know, how you engage your livelihood, and still show up every day and still try and love on and maintain history in that way.
It's very political. And, you know, I remember seeing, I was looking in the archives one day at the New Orleans Public Library and remember coming upon a picture of this. It's 1930s, 1940s black and white picture of a New Orleans restaurant. And it was a fine dining restaurant. And then the mural on the back of the wall was a scene of black folks picking cotton and a white man on a horse overseeing them. And then, you know, the steamboat was in the background. You know, and it struck me because, you know, that juxtaposition, you know, and the fruits of your labor kind of thing, you know. And then, you know, just thinking about my own ancestors, my dad's side is from New Orleans, you know, and when I look at, you know, when I'm able to like trace them in the New Orleans census, and then they're listed as cooks, you know, some of them are listed as cooks, manual laborers, you know, laymen, all these things. It's mind blowing. And to understand sometimes when you walk in New Orleans, especially in the French Quarter and the Treme and historic neighborhoods, you are literally walking where your ancestors walked. That changes your perception on a lot of things, you know, and when you're in the space to do the work, you know, and there are, you know, some positive things happening out of this, but these stories need to be told. I mean, there were slave pens all throughout, you know, the French Quarter. You know, and we sometimes romanticize these stories and we fall into it, but it was brutal, you know, and we want to say the quadroon balls and, you know, think that was cute. That wasn't cute. You know what I mean? Nothing, you know, and it's also, you know, some of that is myth, you know, folklore to bring tourism dollars in at the time. You know, it's a long list of trying to cater to, you know, certain groups of male sexual appetites.
That part. That part.
Yeah.
I find sometimes, I mean, this again. So the book is Recipes and Remembrances of Fair Dillard,
Mm-hmm.
um,
1869.
1869 to 2019. And it's available everywhere. I think it's like this. It was sold out for a little while, and it was a local project. It was sort of it became this like really beautiful like passion project. And you talk a little bit about like the struggle of like getting publishers to believe in the power of that book, the power of the history of HBCU, but specifically Dillard. And you talked a little bit about it earlier, but it's a tricky thing, right? The hashtag right now on Twitter about what publishers pay me,
Mm-hmm.
this sort of sense of the power of media forms like book publishing,
Yeah.
as defined the times in which they exist. And in a lot of ways, like experts and folks with the sort of stories to tell have to be believed and have to be
Yeah.
given access to larger spaces to be able to have projects sort of be as massively available as possible. But I think some of the lessons that I've learned from watching you with Dillard and certainly thinking about New Orleans is kind of that like we just got to kind of keep it in community in a way, or like sort of rely on the power of community in ways that subvert the mainstream, because it just feels sometimes like the power of your book is like that you just got it done in community, and it's this evidence of the fact that like we're gonna do these projects regardless. It's gonna be dope. Like the difference is the access to more resources. And no, the
I,
others just feel sometimes like they don't just get out of the way and just let us be dope.
I think the difference is the frustrating part is once again, it stays within our community. It stays in New Orleans. It stays in, Charleston. It stays in communities. But that is a great thing. But it's not also letting other Black communities know our history, right? And I think about my parents, they're in their 80s and they put out a book called The World is Watching, and it Third World Press, published it. And my dad grew up with, the publisher Third World Press. And, but the challenge is sometimes when you challenge with a small publisher, they don't have a marketing budget, So it's really challenging sometimes to get your work out there. And if you have, you're in New York is a huge, publishing, the capital of publishing. So some of you all have more access to these publishers than
Right.
we do in the South, and, it's just, we try to get the word out, but sometimes it's frustrating. I look at there's one book, it's on the top of my about Albert Thrasher about the 1811 slave revolt. Now he did, and Leon Waters did all this research, and then someone from Harvard, the research, and now his book is acclaimed and he got a publishing deal, and this happens over and over and over again. So, I think about where do we go from here to make sure, do we support, do people in PR help, smaller books get out there more and get, nationally recognized. We publish within like Third World Press. Like I said, I mean, he's been doing it since the 60s,
Right.
but
Right.
does it, the marketing budget is real, and I publish with University of Lafayette Press, and I appreciate, that always local publishers will come forward when you're telling stories about New Orleans or Louisiana,
Mm-hmm.
but we have got to like figure out that piece,
Mm-hmm. I mean, so Zella, I mean, I'm interested in what you're working on next, because I feel like we have the 45-minute mark. I think it's been a lot of good comments so far. I don't want us to leave without talking about Miss Chase, if you are up to it. But I want to know also what else you're working on, because it feels so much like you've been in this sort of fertile sort of research space for a long time, and I think so much of your mind is, so much of the way you think is about the missing parts, the sort of unseen spaces. And so I'm wondering if you are interested in talking about what else you're working on, and then maybe finish with Ms. Chase if no one has any questions.
Okay. So what I'm working on, I've been blogging a lot. You know, I just felt this burning need to tell, especially after that Netflix film, Self-Made, you know, I felt it was important to lift up my great-grandfather and my great-grandmother's story. Because a lot of the times our stories go to the grave. And I would love to have a publisher to put, you know, I'm manifesting that so that
That's
I can
right.
write and actually get an advance for a change. And I don't have to write the book for free and actually make time for it, you know, and then write a novel for the first time about my family, because I think about just, you know, their story is incredible, you know, and all, you know, and then I want to continue to push our food studies minor and still get more students enrolled, you know, and really make that build the foundation so we can build the next food policy makers, the food lawyers, food writers, food activists, you know, all of those things. And, you know, working in agriculture industry and just changing it, you know, I just want to see things like that. And, you know, I want to travel more, obviously, you know, all of us do, you know, definitely want to be much more on the, you know, on the continent, visiting family in Nigeria, visiting family in Cuba, you know, I want to, you know, this pandemic, we couldn't go to the Lumbee powwow that we go every year, you know, in North Carolina. And, you know, it's rescheduled for October. So hopefully I'll be able to go then. And I would look forward to that. But that's what I've been working on. And just, you know, feeding these kids in this house. That's all. You know.
Well, because I also, there's something about, I feel like there's something about, the point you're making about publishing is really interesting. But there's something about just being so clear-eyed about what you want to say. And I'm thinking about it because so many people I'm talking to over the last couple of weeks especially, it's such a particular time when we have time to think. Like some of the issues around the food system and sort of hospitality industry in general is that our bodies are so invested in this mechanism that does not serve us. It serves the country. I mean, the way we frame even essential workers, the verbiage of that makes us essential, but the labor of this industry is so brutal on our bodies, on our spirits. And so many of us are having this is the first time so many of us are having time to think and stop and pause and just consider what else we want to be doing, right? Like there's this sense that this moment shouldn't be squandered. I don't know, I'm loving your blog. I'm loving the fact that you are having this sort of time to focus on things you want to focus on. I think that access to publishing and that access to sort of more resources is a big deal. And I wasn't diminishing it. I just felt like there's something about, like, I think about someone like Howard Conyers. I think about you. I think about people like Davida Davison who sort of subvert mainstream spaces very often and get so much more valuable work done because you are not beholden to it. So I don't know. I think about that a lot. Because again, like these conversations are so dope to have them crystallize. So I'm trying to look at comments, but also be present. I'm thinking about, because you also have Dillard University, y'all have taken to Instagram Live as well. And the conversations you've been having have been so gorgeous. Something about hearing from folks who just have their heads down, doing their work, and are just dope, being able to hear in this platform. In their own voices on it, like tell their own stories is so brilliant. Can you talk about, because you have a dope conversation coming up that this is the one I have been waiting for.
Today at 3 p.m. You know, Central Standard Time, 3 p.m. Central Standard Time on Dillard_Ray Charles on Instagram. Please join us. Angela and June Provost from Provost Farms in New Iberia Parish. They were part of the 1619 Project article that a lot of you all might have read in the New York Times. And they're Louisiana sugarcane workers. What they've gone through you know, and the legacy of their family and just them being in the sugarcane industry is huge. And
Yeah.
I don't think you want to miss this conversation. So please
Nope.
join us, you know, on Dillard _ Ray Charles at 3 p.m. Central Standard Time today.
Yes. Yes. That's, I mean, that's the other part of it, right? Like, again, I think somebody asked earlier, like, were we going to talk about the politics of food? I'm like, yeah, we have been. I feel
Yeah.
like the nature of the lens of food allows so that we can see ourselves and see the expanded nature and the sort of the imagination of ourselves through the lens
Right.
of the work of doing food. It's all political. It's all necessary.
You know, Ashton, and a lot of folks, Ashton Berry has been doing an
Yeah.
incredible radical exchange. You know, even, you know, shout out to, you know, some of our allies. I mean, Caleb Ziggins in La Cocina, you know, doing incredible work. And we're going to have him, you know, we're going to talk to him, I think next week, if I'm not mistaken.
Awesome.
So there's people doing work everywhere, and there is a shift that's happening right now where you will see more people growing, and it's so amazing to have Gabrielle Etienne from North Carolina you know, yesterday, and you know they launched Tall Grass Food Box, and they're working with 14 Black farmers and supplying food, and just saying that we are going to take this back. You know, and she was living in, you know, she's originally from North Carolina. She was living in New York and just wanted to go back to the land, you know. And when I went to the Lumbee Powwow last year, the slogan is always return to the land, you know. And I think that's why I left Chicago, because I wanted to return to the land. You know, I'm the second generation removed from the South, and I wanted to do more work in New Orleans and North Carolina, where my people are from.
Yes. I feel like I'm always kind of time, but I feel like we would be remiss if we did not talk about Mrs. Chase. And I mean, to talk about the lens of food and the politics of food, you can't have a better example than Mrs. Chase. Something about when she talks about the function of Chase, the function, the political nature, and the sort of clear-eyed necessity for that space and community, and the way in which that place is a time capsule for the progress, it's the hard-fought progress that you can see just in that place. You wrote a beautiful piece upon her passing. Your documentary, like your documentary work around her legacy, has been unparalleled, and just something about the stories and the sort of her narrative that you're able to offer outside of other folks' imagination onto her. There's this thing I'm interested in about how we canonize people, canonize these figures that are so important to us, just like culturally in sort of broad strokes. But in that canonization, we sort of steal their humanity and still the complexity of who they were as fully formed people. And so the questions you get to ask her, you get the opportunity to ask her over her life, and just being in place in the community with her. It's so beautiful. You talk about that.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure when I interviewed her, I did a couple pieces. You know, I wrote about her for in Essence magazine when she passed, and I wrote a lot about her in 64 Parishes, and then my student documentary, The Story of New Orleans Creole Cooking, The Black Hand in the Pot, is on YouTube, the full one, so you all can watch that, and she's in there. But you know, we know her, or we knew her. We still, sometimes I still feel her, you know, but she was human, you know, and that's what happens. You know, goes back to what happens to hospitality workers. You give your all, and then your legs go out, you know, and you have to like sit there. And I wanted people to know that she was human. I mean, she had to watch her daughter die in childbirth. And when you think about the politics of Black women and childbirth, and you know, sometimes, you know, how a lot of us are dying in childbirth, and then she had to open the restaurant the next day, you know, because she couldn't close, she couldn't afford it, you know. So you know, and sometimes we, you know, we come and we a lot, you know, a lot of tourists would come and it was great, you know, they needed the, you know, and she wanted not to talk about just, you know, negative things and things like that,
No.
but always careful how we treat sometimes our Black icons, because we have to be careful that we don't make them into cartoon characters, and then you just see them on murals and then they're no longer there. You know what I mean? And those stories don't get to be told. So it's always been a part of our vision and mission to document these stories, because as Howard always says, you know, a lot of these stories are going to the grave, and we are about to lose an entire generation, the baby boomers, all of that. And if we don't document them and film them and actually sit down with our elders, we will never know what happened. And then somebody else will tell us what happened. And that's not the truth, you know? So Miss Leah, you know, and I'm just, you know, she left such a strong foundation for the city of New Orleans, for the legacy of Creole cuisine, and for her family. You know, I look at, you know, what Duke, you know, her grandson, she sent him to culinary school in France. They opened up, you know, immediately after, you know, while she, you know, when she transitioned, to open up Leah's Kitchen in New Orleans Airport, you know, all of these things. So, and then they, you know, the family is working on renovating the second floor where those civil rights workers actually met. Yes. But then also, you know, she, in the documentary, she said something that was really powerful. You know, she said, we didn't eat, you know, macaroni and all, you know, and all of these things every day, you know, we ate them on Sunday. And I think about that, you know, and we have to understand also that when we put sometimes soul food, so you can't eat it every day, you know, sometimes they had soup, they couldn't afford it. They couldn't afford meat every day, you know, and when you look at diets and things like that, we have to be conscious of that. And so, you know, it's also about reclaiming the agriculture of the South, the North, the West, all of that, you know, and actually eating good and growing more. Because we have a greenhouse at Dillard. We got the greenhouse windows fixed, but, you know, we want to grow some things. We want students to see what a real tomato tastes like, you know?
Yes. So just we got a few minutes left. I feel like, I mean, every time being impacted by your work at Dillard, the Ray Charles program as a construct is so dope. I mean, people can donate directly. People can buy the cookbook that benefits the program. They can go on YouTube right now.
Students.
They can, yes. Just there's tangible ways to find this information and to experience what you all are sharing with the world for lots of times for free, but because you understand the power of that culture and documenting it. I don't know. What else do you have going that you want people to support? I feel like we covered a ton, but I'm just so excited.
Join us today, 3 p.m. Dillard_Ray Charles. You know, for another interesting conversation, and you can always DM us, you know, and just, you know, how you want to support, just to say hello, whatever, you know. And Therese has all my information. My blog is www.masonzella.com, and you can read about you know, Madam C.J. Walker's doctor.
Right.
Thank you.
I appreciate you so much. This has been so good. Yeah, I just love you, and I
love you more.
This is so, I don't know, I'm so impacted by the work you're doing at Dillard, and
Thank
it's
you.
just it's such small and big ways we can all just pour on and love on that program. So if you
grow
are so inclined
out there, grow something, take care of self, take care of community, make sure you all have masks, you know, and protect yourself. You know, that's important, you know, even if you're out there being active, and, you know, just make sure you do some self-care and really protect yourself.
And just say the name of the documentary one more time.
Oh, The Story of New Orleans Creole Cooking, The Black Hand in the Pot, and it's on YouTube. You just look it up.
Yep. Thank you so much, Zoe.
I
appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and you take care of you, and I love you, and I love you all out there. Thank you. Thank you for watching.
Thank y'all. So dope. So Zella Palmer is a treasure. Later on today, over if you are hopefully at this will be in week 6, people. So hopefully you are currently following Black Food Folks. And over on that feed at I believe 2 o'clock, maybe 1 o'clock. Paolo Velez, brilliant pastry chef who's been doing some good conversations over there, is going to be talking to one of her team members about life in pastry, reopening the restaurant, just career and life, being dope and young, gifted and Black and brown in its work right now. So that's over on Black Food Folks. You should follow because it's a lot of really good conversations the rest of the week. And I'm so excited to be doing these conversations going forward. Next week, we're going to be talking to Dr. Monica White. Dr. Monica White is a brilliant writer, professor of economic justice or ecological justice at University of Wisconsin. And her new book, Freedom Farmers, is gorgeous. So, yeah, man. And yeah, I'm Trace Nelson, Black Culinary, and you can follow my work at blackculinaryhistory.com as well as here at Black Culinary. So thank y'all. Week 6 done in the books, and we'll see you guys next week.